Get out of here, Joe. Get out of here. Well, anyways, I've been working for nonprofits for the past 40 years, and the Quakers has been a big program in the state of Maine for, over 50 years. And anyways, I just continue to step forward wherever I needed to, wherever I thought that I should, where other people wouldn't. And that is probably why I'm here today. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but my siblings worked in the farms, they worked in the woods, and the mill work wherever was available up in Aroostook County, but it was all, labor workers. In Aroostook County today is exactly what the Native Americans made it 50 years ago. Because 50 years ago, 60 years ago, they were planting 250,000 acres of potatoes. And at 150 barrels per acre, that totaled up around 37,500,000 barrels of potatoes that needed to be harvested within 5 or 6 weeks. And they never had the population to do that. So they would go into the reservations and they would bring truckloads of Native people from as far away as Nova Scotia to harvest the work. And what's the best way to build the economy is when your dollar comes into the community, you keep it there, let it circulate 5 or 6, 7 times before it leaves the community. Anyways, the money that came into Aroostook County during planting season, a lot of the Native people helped plant, but they spent their money right there. And in the fall of the year, during harvest, the farmers got their money from the government once again, and they would bring the natives in. And the natives are from the 4 tribes, not just the Micmac, not just my tribe. But they would come in with no money. They would work all fall. They'd spend their money in groceries, taxis, alcohol, clothing, and the court system. Because in Holton, where I'm from, the farmers used to come in on Saturday night and just stand around and watch 5,000 Native Americans spending the money. And that's just about how many there was. But the court system would take advantage of that. The cops would pick up anybody that was, had a beer or a couple of beers, or, after a hard week in the fields, they would go to town and get alcohol in them and fight. And then the farmer would get down Monday morning to say that one there, this one here, and that one there is mine. And he'd pay their fines so that Native Americans starting off another week in the hole again. So they would come in with nothing, and 5 or 6 weeks later, they would leave with nothing, because they spent everything that they had in that community. And that was throughout Aroostook County, from Danforth right up to Fort Kent. But in the lumber business wasn't much different. My brother used to go into the woods in the fall after harvest, and he would spend the winter in there. And I heard him talking one time that there was 12 people in the camp where he was working, and I think 9 or 10 of them were Micmac, and a couple were from another tribe. And so I mean the lumber business was just worked by a lot of Native Americans also. Blueberry in Washington County, there used to be 95% of the blueberries that were harvested back then were harvested by Native Americans. And it wasn't until they started bringing in people from Mexico or California, that a lot of the Native Americans stopped coming, because there used to be an opportunity there to make an honest dollar if you get out there and worked hard. But when they brought people in that would, work for next to nothing, which was big money to them, it dropped prices right down to where the native people just didn't want to work that hard for that little bit of money. So it's the economy in the state of Maine is the Native Americans played quite a role on that. My tribe is 31, 32 reservations strong. And my band is the only one that's in the state of Maine. And it's the only Micmac band that is federally recognized within the United States, which wasn't always the case. The Settlement Act of 1980, the Micmacs were left out of that. I asked one person why, and he said that we were not seen as a community. We were in association with the Houlton Band of Maliseets, Association of Aroostook Indians, and the Maliseets got recognition back in 1980. The Micmacs didn't, and they said that we wasn't a community because we were scattered throughout 23 townships of Aroostook County. And the Houlton Band of Maliseets were primarily in Houlton. So we was another 11 years getting the same package that the Maliseets got in 1980. The Micmac Settlement Act is totally different than the Maine Indian Settlement Act of 1980. So it's very difficult to balance that, trying to work in unity with the 4 tribes, working together, but at the same time recognizing our bill as totally, a little more independent than some of the others. The Maine Implementing Act that was signed by the tribes after the 1980 Settlement Act, we rejected that and didn't sign into it. A few years ago, we sent a letter to Governor LePage and told him that we were willing to sit down and negotiate an agreement with him, and he flatly just ignored it, and he didn't want to talk to us at all. And we're going to give Governor Mills the same opportunity here in the near future, and hopefully, she'll be willing to work with us a little closer than LePage was. And so, with the history of the Micmac people, it's always been a lot of poverty. A lot of our people joined the military because once they got a uniform on, they were treated equal and looked at as equal. A lot of people went into the cities. We were iron workers, so there was a lot of Micmacs in New York and Boston. In the late 80s, when we were fighting for federal recognition, Boston Indian Council had 3,500 Micmacs on their membership list. The Micmacs didn't have any Indian health service, so therefore Boston Indian Council could service other tribes from the United States, but couldn't service any of the Micmacs in Indian health service. A lot of these people went home after some of the bills that were passed in Canada and gave the natives in Canada a little better lifestyle than what they were getting before. Although it's still kind of rough on the reservations in Canada. There's unemployment rate is high. The unemployment rate in Aroostook County right now for my people is very high. We're still dealing with alcohol. We're still dealing with drugs. And, as John was saying, that is just more visible when you can look down on somebody and say, oh, they're an alcoholic. Those Indians are alcoholics. But if you look around their own community, they'll find the same problems. Drugs is a big thing, not only in my community, but in your community and across the state and across the nation. and there's got to be a way to combat that, and we don't know what it's going to take. We've had some problems in our community, and we start banishment. We put banishment on the 5 people and told them there is no way that they can come on Indian property until they do something about their alcohol and drug problem, and and prove that they've come clean and want to improve their life. So we have many different problems that we face on daily basis, and also with trying to get many things that's needed for our tribe. One of the big things that's the problem with the federal government, when in 1980, when they signed away their rights, there was a piece into that bill that gave that stated that no federal bills, no bills that are coming from Washington, D.C., that affects Native Americans across the United States will not affect the main tribes unless it specifically states the main tribes. So therefore, there's benefits coming across the United States with an Indian country that the 4 main tribes cannot take advantage of. And hopefully we can get that changed here sometime in the next, in the future. So it's been very difficult working with my tribe, and also with dealing with a lot of times we had 2-year terms for our chief and council, and one of the biggest things there is it takes 2 years to learn anything. If you haven't proved yourself in some way, then you're voted out, and somebody else with no education or no experience is voted in, and they do the same thing. And we just recently started 4-year terms, staggered terms, and hopefully we can work that a little better. So anyways, I could stand here and rant, but not make sense probably. But I'll stop there and see if there's any questions that anybody might have. If not, I will head back to my chair. Nobody. John.
What's the biggest potato basket you ever made?
I am a basket maker, and I've made baskets as small as 2 inches, and I have the world's record on the largest potato basket that's in the museum, Agricultural Museum in Littleton, Maine. And it stands about this high, and it's about that wide, and the handle is up 7.5 feet. That's because somebody challenged me to do something for the museum. And I said, okay, after a few years. The school that I went to is also the Agricultural Museum today. And the president of that was my classmate. And every time we talked about, what we can do for the museum, he always wanted to, create some kind of a Native American area. And he said, well, you have to do something to help me build that up. Anyways, a few years ago, I told him that I told him where he could find some money, and I said, if you can find enough money, I said, I'll make a basket that's a little bigger than normal. But it took a month. I said, I can weave that up in 2 days. But it took thick splints to weave that. And whenever I pounded out a stick, I had to throw about half of the splints to one side because they were too thin and they would have crushed on themselves. And got her done in about a month with the help of my 3 daughters. My daughter from Nova Scotia came over, and she was my photographer for the month. And so that was an exciting time. Thank you.